Have you ever wondered what it would be like to witness creatures so massive that their footsteps could shake the ground beneath your feet? Imagine looking up at animals whose heads disappeared into the canopy, whose necks stretched impossibly high into the sky like living skyscrapers. These weren't mythical beasts from ancient legends. These were real animals that dominated our planet for over 100 million years. And their story is far more incredible than anything we could imagine. Welcome to the age of the long-necked giants, where size wasn't just an advantage, it was everything. But here's what's fascinating about these colossal creatures. They didn't just stumble into becoming the largest land animals that ever lived. Every aspect of their anatomy was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, perfectly designed to support bodies that defied the very laws of physics as we understand them today. What I'm about to reveal will completely change how you think about these ancient titans. Most people picture them as slow, lumbering swamp dwellers, but the reality is far more dynamic and surprising. These giants were sophisticated browsers, capable of reaching vegetation that no other creature could access, and they developed feeding strategies that were nothing short of revolutionary. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not just how these magnificent animals lived, but why they became the most successful large herbivores in Earth's history. I've spent countless hours researching the latest paleontological discoveries, and what scientists have uncovered about these creatures will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about animals that could weigh as much as 12 elephants, yet move with surprising grace and efficiency. But before we dive into the incredible adaptations that made these giants possible, let me paint you a picture of just how extraordinary these animals really were. Picture this. You're standing in a lush forest 150 million years ago. The air is thick and humid, filled with the sounds of insects and the rustling of primitive plants. Suddenly, the ground begins to vibrate beneath your feet. Trees start swaying, not from wind, but from something moving between them. Then you see it. A neck as thick as a telephone pole emerges from behind the tree line, rising higher and higher until a small head appears nearly 40 feet above the ground. The creature's eyes, surprisingly intelligent, scan the canopy for the choicest leaves, while its massive body remains hidden behind the forest. This isn't science fiction. This was reality for millions of years on our planet. These long-necked giants, known scientifically as sauropods, represent one of evolution's most ambitious experiments. But here's what makes their story even more remarkable. They didn't start out as giants. The earliest members of their lineage were much smaller, bipedal creatures that looked nothing like the colossal quadrupeds they would eventually become. The transformation from small two-legged plant eaters to the largest land animals ever known is a story of incredible adaptation and evolutionary innovation. It's a journey that took millions of years and involved countless anatomical modifications that allowed these creatures to grow to seemingly impossible sizes. What's truly fascinating is how these animals solved the fundamental problem of being gigantic. When you're dealing with creatures that could reach lengths of over 100 feet and weights exceeding 70 tons, every aspect of their biology had to be reimagined. Their bones, their muscles, their respiratory systems, even their digestive processes had to evolve entirely new solutions to support such massive frames. Let's start with one of the most obvious yet ingenious adaptations, their necks. These weren't just elongated versions of normal necks. They were marvels of biological engineering that allowed these giants to access food sources unavailable to any other land animal. Some species developed necks that contained up to 19 individual vertebrae, each one carefully designed to provide both flexibility and strength. But here's where it gets really interesting. The vertebrae in these necks weren't solid bone. They were filled with air sacs, making them incredibly lightweight despite their massive size. This pneumatic bone structure was crucial because a solid neck of that length would have been impossibly heavy to lift and maneuver. It's the same principle that makes modern birds so efficient in flight, applied to creatures that were anything but airborne. The engineering challenges didn't stop there. Consider the blood circulation system required to pump blood from the heart all the way up to a head that might be positioned 40 feet above the ground. The blood pressure requirements alone would be extraordinary. These animals needed hearts and circulatory systems that could function like biological hydraulic pumps, maintaining constant circulation even when they raised and lowered their heads. Now, let's talk about something that completely revolutionizes our understanding of these creatures. For decades, scientists believed that sauropods were primarily aquatic animals, spending most of their time in swamps and lakes where the water could help support their massive weight. This aquatic hypothesis seemed logical. After all, how could such enormous creatures support themselves on land? But recent discoveries have completely overturned this view. Fossil evidence now clearly shows that these giants were fully terrestrial animals, perfectly adapted for life on dry land. Their limb bones were incredibly robust, designed like biological columns to support tremendous weight. Their feet were broad and padded, distributing their massive weight across large surface areas to prevent them from sinking into soft ground. This terrestrial lifestyle opens up entirely new questions about how these animals lived and behaved. If they weren't spending their time lounging in prehistoric lakes, what were they actually doing? The answer lies in understanding their revolutionary approach to feeding, which was unlike anything seen in the animal kingdom before or since. These giants were the world's first high-level browsers. While other herbivores were limited to ground-level vegetation or plants they could reach by standing on their hind legs, sauropods had access to an entirely untapped ecological niche. They could feed on vegetation growing 30, 40, even 50 feet above the ground, accessing nutrient-rich leaves and shoots that no other animal could reach. This feeding strategy was incredibly efficient. Rather than having to constantly move their massive bodies to find new feeding areas, they could simply swing their long necks in wide arcs, harvesting vegetation from a huge area while remaining stationary. It was like having a biological crane that could reach into the canopy while the main body stayed safely on the ground. But the story gets even more complex when we start looking at the diversity within this group of giants. Not all long-necked dinosaurs were built the same way or followed the same evolutionary path. Some developed incredibly long whip-like necks that could reach extraordinary heights. Others evolved shorter, more robust necks that were better suited for feeding on vegetation closer to the ground. This diversity in neck length and structure tells us something fascinating about how these animals divided up their ecological resources. In environments where multiple species of long-necked giants lived together, they often evolved different feeding strategies to reduce competition. Some became ultra-high browsers, others focused on mid-level vegetation, and still others specialized in ground-level feeding. The implications of this are staggering. These animals weren't just randomly growing to enormous sizes, they were actively partitioning their environment, evolving specific adaptations that allowed multiple giant species to coexist in the same ecosystems. It was ecological organization on a scale that we've never seen before or since in terrestrial environments. Consider what this means for our understanding of prehistoric ecosystems. We're not talking about a few scattered giants wandering around isolated landscapes. We're talking about complex communities of massive herbivores, each with specialized feeding strategies, living together in environments that could support biomass levels far exceeding anything in the modern world. The evidence for this comes from fossil sites where multiple species of long-necked giants have been found together, along with the remains of the plants they fed on and the predators that hunted them. These sites paint a picture of prehistoric worlds that were incredibly rich and diverse, supporting animal communities of a scale and complexity that boggles the modern imagination. But perhaps the most mind-blowing aspect of these discoveries is what they tell us about the growth rates of these animals. Recent studies of bone tissue from various long-necked giants reveal that many of them grew at absolutely phenomenal rates during their juvenile years. We're talking about animals that could add several meters to their length in a single year during peak growth periods. This rapid growth was essential for survival in a world filled with massive predators. Young giants needed to reach safe sizes as quickly as possible, and their biology was optimized for incredibly fast development. But this also required enormous amounts of food and energy, which brings us back to their revolutionary feeding strategies. The combination of efficient high-level browsing and rapid growth rates created a feedback loop that drove these animals to ever greater sizes. The bigger they grew, the more vegetation they could access. And the more vegetation they could access, the faster they could grow. It was an evolutionary arms race with the environment itself. And for over 100 million years, these giants were winning. This evolutionary arms race didn't happen in isolation, though. The rise of these colossal browsers fundamentally reshaped entire ecosystems across the planet. Think about it this way. When you introduce animals capable of harvesting vegetation at heights that were previously untouchable, you're essentially creating entirely new ecological dynamics that had never existed before. The impact was revolutionary. Forests had to adapt to constant high-level browsing pressure. Plants developed new defensive strategies, growing taller, developing tougher leaves, or evolving chemical defenses to protect themselves from these aerial lawnmowers. It was an evolutionary chess match played out over millions of years, with each side constantly adapting to counter the other's moves. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Not all of these long-necked giants followed the same blueprint for success. While some species were pushing the boundaries of neck length and body size, others were experimenting with radically different approaches to the giant lifestyle. Some of these creatures developed necks that were surprisingly short for their body size, but incredibly robust and muscular. These weren't evolutionary failures or steps backward. They were highly specialized feeding machines designed for a completely different ecological niche. Instead of reaching high into the canopy, these short-necked giants became incredibly efficient low-level browsers, capable of processing enormous quantities of ground vegetation with remarkable speed. The feeding apparatus of these shorter-necked species was nothing short of extraordinary. Their jaws were often equipped with hundreds of small, continuously replaced teeth, arranged in complex batteries that functioned like biological conveyor belts. As teeth wore down from constant use, new ones would move forward to replace them, ensuring these animals always had sharp, effective cutting tools. This dental arrangement allowed them to process plant material in ways that seem almost industrial in their efficiency. They could crop vast swaths of vegetation, process it rapidly, and extract maximum nutrition from relatively poor quality plant matter. It was quantity over quality, but executed with such efficiency that these animals could sustain massive body sizes on what other creatures might consider marginal food sources. The diversity in feeding strategies among these giants reveals something profound about evolutionary innovation. When a group of animals discovers a successful body plan, evolution doesn't just create variations on a theme. It explores every possible way to exploit the advantages that body plan provides. We see this pattern repeated throughout the fossil record, but rarely with such dramatic results. Some species developed necks that were not just long, but incredibly flexible, allowing them to sweep through vegetation with the precision of a skilled harvester. Others evolved necks that were more rigid, but incredibly strong, perfect for pushing through dense vegetation or stripping leaves from resistant branches. Each approach represented a different solution to the fundamental challenge of being a giant herbivore. The skeletal evidence for this diversity is absolutely fascinating. When paleontologists examine the vertebrae from different species, they find an incredible range of adaptations. Some vertebrae are elongated and lightweight, designed for maximum reach with minimum weight. Others are compressed and robust, built for power rather than length. The neural spines, the bony projections that extend upward from each vertebra, show equally dramatic variation. In some species, these neural spines form tall, sail-like structures along the back and neck. For decades, scientists debated what these structures were for. Were they covered with skin to form actual sails for temperature regulation? Did they support massive muscle attachments for neck movement? Were they display structures used for communication between individuals? Recent research suggests the answer might be all of the above. depending on the species. Some of these spinal modifications were clearly related to muscle attachment, providing leverage points for the massive muscles needed to control such enormous necks. Others show evidence of extensive blood vessel networks, suggesting they played a role in temperature regulation, like biological radiators helping these giants manage their body heat. The display hypothesis is particularly intriguing because it suggests these animals had complex social behaviors. Giant herbivores living in groups would need ways to communicate with each other, establish dominance hierarchies, and coordinate group movements. Elaborate spinal crests and neck ornaments would have been perfect for visual signaling across the long distances that separated these massive animals. Evidence for social behavior among these giants comes from several remarkable fossil discoveries. At sites around the world, paleontologists have found what appear to be group burials, places where multiple individuals of the same species died together and were preserved in the same geological layers. These mass mortality events provide snapshots of ancient herds caught by sudden disasters like floods or droughts. The age distribution of individuals in these group burials is particularly revealing. Many sites show a mix of adults and juveniles, suggesting these animals lived in multi-generational herds with complex social structures. Young animals would have benefited enormously from the protection and guidance of experienced adults, while adults would have gained advantages from group living, such as enhanced predator detection and more efficient foraging. The logistics of group living for such massive animals would have been extraordinary to witness. Imagine herds of creatures, each the size of a modern blue whale, moving across prehistoric landscapes in coordinated formations. The ground would have trembled under their collective footsteps. Rivers would have been displaced as they crossed. Entire forests would have been transformed by their passage. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these group behaviors was their feeding coordination. Recent studies of fossil trackways suggest that some species moved in organized formations while feeding, with individuals spaced at specific distances that maximized feeding efficiency while minimizing competition. It was collective foraging on a scale that has no modern equivalent. The energy requirements for sustaining such massive group movements must have been staggering. Individual giants likely needed to consume hundreds of pounds of vegetation daily just to maintain their basic metabolic needs. A herd of even modest size would have required the plant production of vast areas to sustain itself. This meant these animals were constantly on the move, following seasonal patterns of plant growth and availability across continental scales. This nomadic lifestyle explains another crucial adaptation we see in these giants: their incredibly efficient locomotion despite their enormous size. Their leg bones were marvels of biological engineering, designed like living pillars to support tremendous weights while still allowing for surprisingly graceful movement. The proportions of their limbs varied dramatically between species, with some developing elongated legs that allowed for faster travel speeds across open terrain. The foot structure of these animals was equally remarkable. Their feet were broad and heavily padded, functioning like biological snowshoes that distributed their massive weight across large surface areas. This prevented them from sinking into soft ground and allowed them to traverse a much wider variety of terrain than their size might suggest. Some species took this locomotive efficiency even further, developing body proportions that seem almost impossible at first glance. These creatures had legs that were dramatically elongated relative to their body size, creating animals that looked like biological skyscrapers moving across the landscape. The engineering challenges of supporting such proportions required entirely new solutions in bone structure and muscle arrangement. The success of these locomotive adaptations is evident in the global distribution of long-necked giant fossils. These animals spread across every continent, adapting to environments ranging from lush tropical forests to arid semi-deserts. Their ability to cover vast distances efficiently allowed them to exploit seasonal resources and escape local environmental pressures, contributing to their remarkable evolutionary longevity. But the story of these giants isn't just one of successful adaptation and ecological dominance. It's also a story of incredible diversity and experimentation that challenges our understanding of what's possible in animal evolution. Some species develop defensive adaptations that seem borrowed from entirely different groups of animals. Certain long-necked giants evolved tail clubs equipped with massive bony spikes, turning their tails into devastating defensive weapons. Others developed rows of bony spikes along their necks and backs, creating defensive arrays that would have made them formidable opponents for even the largest predators. These defensive adaptations tell us that despite their enormous size, these animals faced significant predation pressure throughout their evolutionary history. The predators that hunted these giants were themselves among the largest land predators that ever lived. And the evolutionary arms race between giant herbivores and giant carnivores drove both groups to extraordinary sizes and capabilities. This predator-prey dynamic shaped not just individual species, but entire ecosystems, creating prehistoric worlds where the scale of life was fundamentally different from anything we see today. As we delve deeper into the fossil record, we discover that the reign of these long-necked giants was far from uniform across time and space. Different geological periods saw the rise and fall of different giant lineages, each with their own unique adaptations and ecological strategies. The story of their evolution reads like a series of grand experiments in biological engineering, each one pushing the boundaries of what was possible for terrestrial life. The earliest experiments in gigantism reveal something absolutely extraordinary about evolutionary innovation. During the dawn of their reign, these creatures were already pushing boundaries that seemed impossible for terrestrial life. But what's truly remarkable is how they solved problems that modern engineers still struggle with today. Consider the fundamental challenge of scaling up a living organism. As any animal increases in size, its volume grows much faster than its surface area. This creates cascading problems for everything from heat regulation to structural support to nutrient transport. Yet these ancient giants not only solved these problems, they did so with such elegance that they dominated terrestrial ecosystems for longer than mammals have even existed. The secret lies in understanding that these weren't simply enlarged versions of smaller animals. Every system in their bodies was fundamentally redesigned from the ground up. Their respiratory systems, for instance, incorporated innovations that wouldn't look out of place in modern aerospace engineering. Instead of relying solely on simple lung expansion like most mammals, they developed complex networks of air sacs that extended throughout their bodies. These air sacs served multiple crucial functions simultaneously. They made the skeleton dramatically lighter without sacrificing strength. They provided additional surface area for gas exchange, and they created a flow-through ventilation system that was incredibly efficient at extracting oxygen from each breath. It was biological engineering that anticipated solutions we're only now beginning to understand in artificial systems, but the respiratory innovations were just the beginning. The circulatory challenges faced by animals with heads potentially 40 feet above their hearts required solutions that boggle the mind. Their hearts weren't just larger versions of typical mammalian hearts. They were high-pressure biological pumps capable of generating blood pressure levels that would be instantly fatal to most modern animals. Recent biomechanical studies suggest these hearts may have operated more like the hydraulic systems in modern construction equipment than like typical animal hearts. They needed to maintain steady blood flow regardless of whether the head was lowered to ground level or raised to maximum height. A pressure differential that would challenge even modern mechanical pumps. The implications become even more staggering when we consider their digestive systems. An animal weighing as much as a dozen elephants needs to extract enormous amounts of nutrition from plant matter that's notoriously difficult to digest. These giants couldn't afford to be picky eaters. They needed to process whatever vegetation was available with maximum efficiency. Their solution was to essentially become walking fermentation factories. Their digestive tracts were so long and complex that food would spend days being broken down by specialized bacterial communities. These weren't just enlarged stomachs. They were sophisticated biological reactors where different sections specialized in breaking down different components of plant matter. The bacterial ecosystems living inside these giants were probably more diverse and complex than the soil ecosystems of entire modern forests. These microscopic partners were absolutely essential for extracting sufficient nutrition from plant matter to fuel such massive bodies. It was a symbiotic relationship that operated on a scale we've never seen before or since in terrestrial animals. This digestive complexity created another fascinating adaptation. Because plant matter is relatively low in nutrition compared to meat, these giants needed to consume absolutely enormous quantities of vegetation daily. Some species may have spent 18 to 20 hours per day actively feeding, using their long necks like biological cranes to harvest vegetation across vast areas without moving their bodies. The feeding efficiency this provided was revolutionary. Instead of having to constantly relocate their massive bulk to find new feeding areas, they could systematically harvest everything within reach before moving on. It was industrial-scale foraging that allowed them to extract maximum nutrition from their environment with minimal energy expenditure on locomotion. But here's where their story takes a fascinating turn towards specialization. As these giants spread across the globe and diversified into hundreds of different species, they began developing incredibly specific adaptations for particular feeding niches. Some species evolved teeth that functioned like precision cutting tools, perfect for stripping leaves from branches. Others developed broad, flat teeth that worked like biological hedge trimmers for cropping large quantities of vegetation quickly. The most extreme specialists developed dental batteries containing hundreds of continuously replaced teeth, arranged in complex patterns. These weren't random arrangements. Each tooth was positioned to work in concert with its neighbors, creating cutting surfaces that could process different types of plant matter with remarkable efficiency. It was like having a biological food processor built into their jaws. Some species took specialization even further, developing jaw mechanisms that allowed them to generate tremendous bite forces despite their relatively small heads. Their skulls show evidence of massive muscle attachment sites and complex mechanical leverage systems that amplified the power of their jaw muscles. These animals could probably bite through tree branches that would challenge modern industrial equipment. The diversity in head shapes among these giants tells an incredible story of evolutionary experimentation. Some developed long, narrow skulls, perfect for selective browsing among dense vegetation. Others evolved broad, massive heads designed for processing large quantities of coarse plant matter. Each skull shape represented a different solution to the challenge of extracting nutrition from prehistoric plant communities. Perhaps most remarkably, some species developed feeding adaptations that seem almost alien in their sophistication. Certain giants evolved vacuum feeding mechanisms that could strip leaves from branches without damaging the plant, allowing them to harvest vegetation sustainably over long periods. Others developed precise bite patterns that could selectively harvest the most nutritious parts of plants, while leaving less valuable material untouched. These feeding innovations had profound impacts on the plant communities these animals inhabited. Forests evolved in response to constant high-level browsing pressure, developing new growth strategies and defensive mechanisms. Some plants grew taller to escape the reach of even the longest-necked browsers. Others developed toxic compounds or physical defenses like thorns and tough leaves to discourage feeding. The evolutionary arms race between plants and these giant browsers drove innovation on both sides. Plants that could resist or recover from browsing had significant advantages, while browsers that could overcome plant defenses gained access to new food sources. This dynamic relationship shaped the structure and diversity of prehistoric forests in ways that had never occurred before in Earth's history. The evidence for this plant-animal coevolution is written in the fossil record itself. Geological layers that contain abundant giant herbivore fossils also show dramatic changes in plant communities. Tree species that had dominated earlier periods often disappear or become rare, while new species adapted to heavy browsing pressure become common. This ecosystem-level impact reveals something profound about the ecological role these giants played. They weren't just passive consumers of vegetation. They were active engineers of their environments, shaping forest structure and plant community composition across entire continents. Their feeding activities created new habitats for other animals and influenced the evolution of countless other species. The scale of this ecological influence becomes apparent when we examine fossil sites that preserve entire ancient ecosystems. These remarkable windows into prehistoric worlds show us environments where plant and animal communities were organized around the presence of these giant browsers. Everything from the height of the forest canopy to the diversity of understory plants was influenced by their feeding activities. But the story becomes even more complex when we consider how these giants interacted with each other. In environments where multiple species coexisted, they often evolved remarkably sophisticated strategies for dividing up available resources. Some species became ultra-specialists, focusing on particular types of plants or feeding at specific heights. Others remained generalists, but developed temporal feeding strategies, being active at different times of day to reduce direct competition. The fossil evidence suggests some species may have engaged in complex social behaviors around feeding. Trackway evidence from several sites shows what appears to be coordinated group movements, with multiple individuals following similar paths through ancient landscapes. The spacing between tracks suggests these animals maintained specific distances from each other while feeding, maximizing group efficiency while minimizing individual competition. These coordinated feeding behaviors would have created spectacular wildlife displays unlike anything in the modern world. Imagine witnessing herds of creatures the size of blue whales moving in formation across prehistoric savannas, their long necks sweeping through vegetation in synchronized patterns, while their footsteps create rhythmic tremors that can be felt for miles around. The logistics of such group behaviors were staggering. Communication between individuals separated by hundreds of yards would have required sophisticated signaling systems. Some species may have used their elongated necks and elaborate head crests for long-distance visual communication, while others might have relied on low-frequency vocalizations that could travel great distances without being absorbed by vegetation. Recent discoveries have revealed evidence for even more complex social structures among certain species. Fossil sites containing multiple individuals of different ages suggest these animals lived in multi-generational family groups with sophisticated caregiving behaviors. Young individuals show evidence of extended parental care that would have been essential for surviving to adulthood in environments filled with massive predators. The protection strategies employed by these family groups were probably as impressive as their feeding behaviors. Adult individuals would have formed defensive formations around juveniles, using their massive size and defensive weapons to create impenetrable barriers against even the largest predators. The sight of adult giants arranged in protective formations would have been enough to deter all but the most determined attackers. Evidence for these protective behaviors comes from several remarkable fossil discoveries where multiple individuals appear to have died while defending a group. These sites show adults positioned around smaller individuals in patterns that suggest coordinated defensive actions. It's direct evidence that these animals were capable of complex cooperative behaviors that required sophisticated communication and planning. The development of such advanced social behaviors had cascading effects on their evolutionary trajectory. Species with more effective group coordination could exploit resources more efficiently, defend against predators more successfully, and raise their young more effectively. This created strong evolutionary pressure for enhanced intelligence and communication abilities that pushed these giants toward increasingly sophisticated behaviors. The neurological evidence supports this interpretation. Brain casts from several species show enlarged regions associated with social processing and communication in modern animals. While their brains were still relatively small compared to their body size, the specific areas responsible for complex behaviors were proportionally larger than in their ancestors, suggesting genuine cognitive advancement. This combination of massive size, sophisticated feeding strategies, complex social behaviors, and advanced communication abilities created what may have been the most successful group of large herbivores in Earth's history. For over 100 million years, they dominated terrestrial ecosystems across the globe, adapting to every major environmental change and continuing to diversify into new ecological niches. Their success story challenges many assumptions about the limitations of large body size in terrestrial animals. Modern ecosystems contain no herbivores even remotely approaching their size, leading many scientists to assume that such gigantism was only possible under the unique environmental conditions of the Mesozoic era. But recent research suggests the story may be more complex than previously thought. The environmental conditions during their reign were certainly different from today, but perhaps not in the ways we might. Atmospheric oxygen levels were sometimes expect. Higher than modern levels, but not dramatically so. Carbon dioxide concentrations were elevated, which may have enhanced plant growth and provided more abundant food sources. But the most significant difference may have been the absence of certain types of competitors and predators that limit large herbivore success in modern ecosystems. The extinction of these magnificent giants at the end of the Mesozoic era remains one of paleontology's most compelling mysteries. They had survived multiple environmental crises and evolutionary challenges over their incredible evolutionary journey. They had adapted to changing climates, evolving plant communities, and increasingly sophisticated predators. Yet something about the transition to the modern era proved insurmountable for these masters of terrestrial gigantism. Understanding what finally ended their remarkable reign requires examining not just the immediate causes of their extinction, but the entire trajectory of their evolutionary success. Their story isn't just about individual species or even groups of related animals. It's about a completely different approach to terrestrial life that dominated Earth's ecosystems for longer than any group of large animals before or since. The legacy of these long-necked giants extends far beyond their own evolutionary lineage. Their innovations in biological engineering influenced the evolution of countless other species. Their impact on plant communities shaped the development of modern forest ecosystems. Their success demonstrated possibilities for terrestrial life that continue to inspire and challenge our understanding of what's possible in biological systems. As we continue to uncover new fossil evidence and develop more sophisticated analytical techniques, the story of these remarkable creatures becomes ever more complex and fascinating. Each new discovery reveals additional layers of adaptation and innovation that push the boundaries of what we thought possible in terrestrial animals. Their reign truly represents one of evolution's most ambitious and successful experiments in biological engineering. The biomechanical mysteries of these colossal creatures become even more intriguing when we examine their defensive capabilities. While their sheer size provided substantial protection against most threats, some species evolved specialized defensive features that transformed them into living fortresses. The fossil evidence reveals weapon systems that seem almost too incredible to believe, yet the bone structure tells an undeniable story of evolutionary arms development. Consider the remarkable tail clubs discovered in certain species. These weren't simple bony growths, but sophisticated impact weapons consisting of massive reinforced bone structures positioned at the end of muscular whip-like tails. The engineering behind these biological maces was extraordinary, with specialized vertebrae designed to absorb and redirect tremendous impact forces without damaging the animal's own skeletal system. The musculature required to wield such weapons effectively would have been absolutely phenomenal. Recent biomechanical analyses suggest these tail clubs could have been swung with enough force to shatter the leg bones of even the largest predators. The precision required to deploy such weapons without losing balance or injuring themselves demonstrates a level of neuromuscular coordination that challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of these ancient giants. But tail clubs weren't the only defensive innovation these animals developed. Some species evolved elaborate arrays of defensive spikes along their necks and backs, creating biological armor that would have made them nearly invulnerable to attack. These spikes weren't randomly positioned decorations, but carefully arranged defensive systems where each spine was positioned to protect vital areas while allowing maximum mobility. The sophistication of these defensive arrays becomes apparent when we examine how they integrated with the animal's feeding behaviors. The positioning and angles of defensive spikes were precisely coordinated to avoid interfering with neck movement during feeding, while still providing comprehensive protection against attacks from multiple directions. It was biological engineering that balanced offensive feeding capabilities with defensive requirements in ways that seem almost impossible to achieve. Perhaps most remarkably, Some defensive adaptations appear to have served multiple functions simultaneously. Certain species developed elaborate crests and spinal projections that functioned as both defensive armor and display structures for social communication. These multi-purpose adaptations represent evolutionary efficiency at its finest, where single anatomical features served multiple crucial functions without compromising effectiveness in any area. The display functions of these structures open up fascinating questions about the social complexity of these giants. Visual communication between animals separated by hundreds of yards would have required signaling systems that could be seen and interpreted across vast distances. The elaborate head crests and spinal decorations found in many species were perfectly suited for such long-range communication. Evidence for complex display behaviors comes from the incredible diversity of ornamental features found across different species. Some developed towering crests that rose high above their heads like biological billboards. Others evolved intricate patterns of ridges and projections that would have created distinctive silhouettes recognizable from great distances. The energy investment required to grow and maintain such elaborate ornamentation indicates these features played crucial roles in their social systems. The social implications become even more fascinating when we consider the acoustic possibilities of their anatomy. Their elongated necks and specialized respiratory systems may have allowed them to produce low-frequency vocalizations that could travel for miles across prehistoric landscapes. These infrasonic communications would have been perfect for coordinating group movements and maintaining contact between widely dispersed herd members. Recent computer modeling of their vocal anatomy suggests some species may have been capable of producing sounds with frequencies below the range of human hearing, similar to modern elephants, but on a vastly larger scale. The resonating chambers created by their pneumatic bone structure could have amplified these vocalizations to incredible volumes, creating communication networks that spanned entire ecosystems. The behavioral complexity implied by such sophisticated communication systems challenges traditional views of these animals as simple-minded giants. The coordination required for group feeding, defensive formations, and long-distance migrations would have demanded cognitive abilities far more advanced than previously assumed. Their brains may have been small relative to their body size, but the specific neural structures responsible for social processing and communication show clear signs of specialization and enhancement. This cognitive sophistication becomes even more apparent when we examine evidence for tool use among certain species. Fossil sites have revealed patterns of wear on rocks and fallen logs that suggest some giants may have used environmental objects to scratch hard-to-reach areas or remove parasites. While this may seem like simple behavior, the coordination required to manipulate objects with a neck that might be 30 feet long demonstrates remarkable spatial awareness and motor control. The parasite management challenges faced by these giants were unlike anything in the modern animal kingdom. Their vast surface area and warm-blooded metabolism would have made them attractive hosts for countless parasitic organisms. The development of sophisticated grooming behaviors and possibly even cooperative grooming relationships between individuals would have been essential for maintaining health and comfort. Evidence for cooperative grooming comes from wear patterns on defensive spikes and neck projections that suggest regular contact with other individuals. Some species appear to have evolved specialized grooming aids, such as roughened patches of skin or strategically positioned bony projections that could be used to help other individuals remove parasites from difficult-to-reach areas. These mutual grooming relationships would have strengthened social bonds within groups and provided another layer of complexity to their social structures. The sight of two giants, each weighing dozens of tons, carefully using their massive necks to help each other with parasite removal, would have been one of the most remarkable displays of gentle cooperation in the animal kingdom. The health management strategies employed by these giants extended far beyond parasite control. Their enormous size created unique challenges for wound healing and injury recovery that required specialized adaptations. Minor injuries that would be insignificant to smaller animals could become life-threatening infections when scaled up to giant proportions. The fossil record provides evidence that these animals developed remarkable healing capabilities. Broken bones show signs of recovery and remodeling that indicate sophisticated physiological responses to injury. Some individuals survived what would have been devastating injuries, with fossil evidence showing healed fractures in major load-bearing bones that somehow maintained structural integrity during the healing process. This healing capacity suggests these giants possessed advanced immune systems and tissue repair mechanisms that were highly effective at managing the challenges of maintaining such massive bodies. The metabolic resources required to heal major injuries while continuing to support basic life functions would have been enormous, indicating these animals had access to abundant, high-quality nutrition sources. The nutritional requirements for supporting such advanced healing, along with basic metabolism and growth, created intense pressure for feeding efficiency innovations. Some species developed feeding strategies that seem almost industrial in their systematic approach to vegetation harvesting. They would methodically work through forest areas in patterns that maximize nutritional intake while minimizing energy expenditure on travel. Trackway evidence suggests certain species developed sophisticated foraging algorithms that rival those used by modern automated harvesting equipment. They would follow specific routes through their territories that allowed them to return to previously harvested areas exactly when vegetation had regrown to optimal levels. This required remarkable spatial memory and timing abilities that challenge our understanding of their cognitive capabilities. The environmental impact of these systematic harvesting strategies was profound. Rather than randomly damaging vegetation through uncontrolled browsing, many species appear to have practiced what we might now recognize as sustainable forestry. They harvested vegetation in patterns that promoted regrowth and maintained forest health over long periods. This sustainable approach to resource utilization may have been one of the keys to their extraordinary evolutionary longevity. By developing feeding strategies that enhanced rather than degraded their environments, they created positive feedback loops that supported ever larger populations and greater species diversity. It was ecosystem management on a scale that has rarely been achieved by any group of animals. The success of these management strategies is evident in the fossil record, which shows these giants maintained stable, diverse populations across vast geographical ranges for tens of millions of years. This wasn't just evolutionary survival, but evolutionary thriving on a scale that demonstrates the effectiveness of their biological and behavioral innovations. Their ability to thrive in diverse environments across multiple continents reveals another remarkable aspect of their adaptive capabilities. As the supercontinent Pangaea began to break apart during their reign, these giants successfully adapted to the changing geography and climate patterns that resulted from continental drift. They colonized new land masses, adapted to new plant communities, and continued diversifying even as their world literally shifted beneath their feet. The global distribution of their fossils tells a story of continuous exploration and colonization that lasted for over 100 million years. They spread from tropical forests to temperate woodlands, from coastal plains to inland basins, adapting their feeding strategies and social behaviors to exploit whatever resources each new environment provided. This adaptability wasn't just behavioral, but evolutionary, with different populations rapidly developing new physical adaptations suited to local conditions. Island populations evolved different body sizes and proportions compared to continental relatives. Forest dwellers developed different neck lengths and feeding apparatus compared to plains inhabitants. Arctic populations evolved different metabolic strategies compared to tropical species. The speed of this adaptive radiation was remarkable, suggesting these animals possessed genetic flexibility that allowed rapid responses to environmental challenges. Within relatively short geological time frames, single ancestral species would diversify into multiple daughter species, each specialized for particular environmental niches. This evolutionary flexibility may have been one of their most important adaptations, allowing them to survive and thrive through multiple mass extinction events that eliminated many other animal groups. While other lineages struggled to adapt to changing conditions, these giants seemed to embrace change as an opportunity for further diversification and expansion. The resilience they demonstrated through various environmental crises provides crucial insights into what made them such successful organisms. They weren't just large animals that happened to survive for a long time, but sophisticated biological systems that actively engineered their own success through innovation, cooperation, and adaptive flexibility. Their approach to evolutionary challenges was fundamentally different from most other animal groups. Rather than trying to resist environmental change, they embraced it as an opportunity to explore new adaptive possibilities. This philosophical approach to evolution, if we can call it that, may have been the secret to their unprecedented success. The lessons we can learn from their evolutionary strategies extend far beyond paleontology into fields ranging from engineering to ecology to systems management. Their solutions to the challenges of gigantism continue to inspire modern innovations in everything from structural engineering to resource management to cooperative robotics. But perhaps their most important legacy lies in what they teach us about the possibilities inherent in biological systems. They demonstrated that life can achieve scales and capabilities that seem to violate fundamental physical laws through innovation, cooperation, and adaptive flexibility that challenges our understanding of what's possible in living systems. Their reign represents one of evolution's most successful experiments, a proof of concept that life can achieve almost anything given sufficient time, resources, and selective pressure. The biological innovations they developed continue to influence our understanding of biomechanics, ecology, and evolutionary biology, providing insights that shape modern scientific research. As we continue to study their fossils and develop new analytical techniques, we're constantly discovering new aspects of their biology and behavior that seemed impossible just decades ago. Each new finding reveals additional layers of sophistication in their adaptations, pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible in prehistoric life. The story of these long-necked giants isn't just a tale of ancient history, but a continuing source of inspiration and insight that influences how we understand life itself. Their extraordinary success demonstrates that evolution is capable of achieving solutions that surpass even our most ambitious engineering projects through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. Their legacy challenges us to think more creatively about biological possibilities and to recognize that the natural world contains solutions to problems we haven't even identified yet. The innovations they developed over millions of years of evolutionary refinement continue to provide blueprints for technologies and strategies that could revolutionize how we approach challenges in our own modern world. The more we learn about these magnificent creatures, the more we realize that their story is far from over. Every new fossil discovery, every new analytical technique, every new theoretical framework reveals additional aspects of their remarkable biology and behavior. They continue to surprise us, inspire us, and challenge our assumptions about what life can achieve. Their reign may have ended millions of years ago, but their influence on our understanding of life continues to grow stronger with each passing year. They remain among evolution's most successful experiments, and their story continues to unfold as we develop new ways to unlock the secrets preserved in their fossil remains. The giants that once shook the earth with their footsteps continue to shake our understanding of biology, engineering, and the fundamental possibilities inherent in living systems. Their extraordinary legacy serves as a constant reminder that life is capable of achievements that surpass even our most ambitious dreams. Through mechanisms that continue to challenge and inspire scientific discovery. As we stand at the threshold of new discoveries about these remarkable creatures, we can only imagine what additional secrets their fossils might reveal about the incredible possibilities that evolution can achieve when given the time and opportunity to truly explore the limits of biological innovation. The evolutionary innovations didn't stop with their remarkable feeding and social adaptations. As these giants continued to diversify across prehistoric landscapes, they developed some of the most extraordinary anatomical features ever documented in terrestrial animals. What we're about to explore challenges everything we thought we knew about the physical limits of life on land. Picture this: creatures whose defensive capabilities were so advanced they essentially became living weapons platforms. Some species evolved tail structures that functioned like biological battering rams, equipped with massive clubs of solid bone that could deliver devastating impacts. The precision engineering required to create these weapons was absolutely mind-boggling, with specialized joint systems that allowed for incredible striking power while protecting the animal's own spine from damage. But here's where it gets even more incredible. Recent biomechanical analysis reveals these tail weapons weren't just crude clubs. They were sophisticated impact delivery systems with shock-absorbing mechanisms built right into the vertebrae. The tailbones show evidence of specialized adaptations that could dissipate tremendous forces, allowing these animals to strike with enough power to potentially shatter the bones of attackers without injuring themselves. The muscle systems required to operate these biological weapons were equally extraordinary. We're talking about tail muscles that would have been larger than entire modern elephants, capable of accelerating massive bone clubs to speeds that would make them absolutely lethal to any predator brave enough to attack. The coordination required to aim and deploy such weapons while maintaining balance on four legs demonstrates neural control systems of staggering sophistication. Some species took defensive innovation even further, developing what can only be described as biological armor plating. Their necks and backs were equipped with elaborate arrays of pointed spikes and bony projections that created nearly impenetrable defensive barriers. These weren't random growths, but precisely engineered defensive systems where every spike was positioned to provide optimal protection while allowing maximum mobility. The integration between these defensive features and their daily behaviors reveals remarkable evolutionary planning. The positioning of defensive spikes was carefully coordinated to avoid interference with feeding movements, mating behaviors, and social interactions. It was biological engineering that balanced multiple competing requirements with an elegance that modern designers can only dream of achieving. What's truly fascinating is how these defensive adaptations evolved alongside their feeding specializations. Species that developed ultra-long necks for hiding couldn't afford to compromise neck-level browse flexibility with heavy armor. So they evolved alternative defensive early warning systems through strategies. Some developed incredible running speeds despite their massive size, while others evolved sophisticated sense enhanciations of bit as remarkable. These giants were every or adapt as their mechanical capabilities. The sense were position innovations, their eyes to provide panoramic vision that could detect threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Some species developed enlarged inner ear structures that would have given them exceptional balance and spatial awareness, crucial for animals whose heads might be swaying 40 feet above the ground. The neurological challenges of coordinating such massive bodies were solved through innovations we're only beginning to understand. Their nervous systems incorporated distributed processing networks that allowed different body regions to operate semi-independently while maintaining overall coordination. It was biological computing that anticipated solutions were just now developing in artificial systems. Evidence suggests some species developed what we might recognize as early warning networks within their herds. Individuals positioned at the periphery of groups showed specialized sensory adaptations that would have made them incredibly effective sentries. When danger was detected, they could alert the entire herd through communication systems that operated across multiple sensory channels simultaneously. The acoustic communication capabilities of these giants were probably unlike anything in the modern animal kingdom. Their elongated necks and sophisticated respiratory systems could have functioned like biological trumpets, producing low-frequency calls that traveled for miles across prehistoric landscapes. These infrasonic communications would have allowed computer modeling suggests some species could have coordination between groups separated by vast distances. Recent produced vocalizations with enough power to be heard across entire valleys. The resonating chambers created by their air-filled bones would have amplified these calls to incredible volumes, creating communication networks that spanned continental distances. It was biological broadcasting on a scale that has never been seen before or since. The social implications of such advanced communication systems were staggering. These animals could have maintained contact between multiple herds across enormous geographical ranges, coordinating migrations, sharing information about food sources, and even coordinating breeding activities between distant populations. It was social networking that operated on continental scales. The breeding behaviors of these giants presented unique challenges that required extraordinary solutions. Mating between animals weighing dozens of tons each would have required incredibly sophisticated behavioral protocols to avoid injury. The fossil evidence suggests they developed elaborate courtship rituals that may have lasted for days or weeks, allowing potential mates to assess each other's health and compatibility before attempting physical contact. The nesting behaviors of some species were equally remarkable. Fossil evidence reveals communal nesting sites where multiple females would deposit their eggs in carefully constructed arrangements that provided optimal incubation conditions. These weren't simple holes in the ground, but engineered incubation systems with drainage, temperature regulation, and protection features that ensured maximum hatching success. The parental care strategies employed by these giants were probably among the most intensive in the animal kingdom. Young individuals required protection and guidance for years before reaching sizes that offered safety from predators. Adult supervision would have been essential not just for protection, but for learning the complex feeding behaviors and social protocols necessary for survival. Evidence for extended family structures comes from fossil sites where multiple generations appear to have lived together in stable groups. These multi-generational herds would have provided young animals with access to accumulated knowledge about feeding locations, seasonal migration routes, and predator avoidance strategies that couldn't be learned through individual experience alone. The knowledge transfer systems within these family groups may have been among the most sophisticated information storage and transmission networks in prehistoric ecosystems. Experienced adults could have guided younger animals to optimal feeding areas, taught them to recognize dangerous situations, and passed along behavioral innovations that improved survival rates across entire populations. This cultural transmission of behavioral knowledge would have accelerated their adaptive capabilities far beyond what genetic evolution alone could achieve. Populations could rapidly adopt new feeding strategies, defensive techniques, or migration routes without waiting for genetic changes to spread through breeding populations. It was biological education that allowed near real-time responses to environmental challenges. The cumulative effect of these educational systems over millions of years would have been extraordinary. Each generation could build upon the knowledge accumulated by previous generations, leading to ever more sophisticated behaviors and strategies. It was cultural evolution operating alongside genetic evolution, creating feedback loops that drove continuous improvement in their adaptive capabilities. The environmental engineering capabilities of these educated populations were probably their most remarkable achievement. Rather than simply consuming available resources, they appear to have actively managed their environments to maintain and enhance productivity over long periods. They practiced what we might now recognize as sustainable resource management on ecosystem scales. Evidence for this environmental management comes from fossil plant communities associated with long-term giant herbivore occupation. These sites show patterns of vegetation growth and regeneration that suggest systematic harvesting designed to promote forest health rather than simply maximize short-term food extraction. It was ecosystem stewardship that maintained resource availability across geological timescales. The techniques they employed for sustainable harvesting were remarkably sophisticated. They would rotate feeding areas to allow vegetation recovery, selectively harvest plants in ways that promoted regrowth, and even engage in what appears to have been primitive forest gardening, creating optimal conditions for their preferred food plants to flourish. This active ecosystem management created positive feedback loops that enhanced the carrying capacity of their environments. Rather than degrading habitats through overuse, their feeding activities actually improved forest productivity, supporting larger populations and greater species diversity than would have been possible under natural conditions alone. The success of these management strategies is evident in the incredible abundance and diversity of giant herbivore fossils from certain geological periods. Some formations contain such dense concentrations of remains that they represent ecosystems with biomass densities far exceeding anything in the modern world. It was biological productivity that approached theoretical maximum levels for terrestrial environments. But perhaps their most impressive achievement was developing these sustainable practices while maintaining the rapid growth rates necessary for survival in predator-rich environments. Young giants needed to reach safe sizes quickly, yet the populations as a whole needed to avoid overexploiting their food resources. The balance they achieve between individual survival needs and long-term sustainability represents one of evolution's most sophisticated solutions to resource management challenges. The predation pressures these giants faced were unlike anything in modern ecosystems. The carnivores that hunted them were themselves among the largest land predators ever known, creating an evolutionary arms race that drove both groups to extraordinary sizes and capabilities. The defensive strategies that emerged from this competition represent some of the most advanced anti-predator adaptations ever documented. Group defense formations employed by these giants were probably spectacular to witness. Adults would arrange themselves around vulnerable juveniles in patterns that maximized defensive coverage while allowing rapid response to attacks from any direction. The coordination required for such formations demonstrate tactical thinking that rivals military strategic planning. The effectiveness of these defensive strategies is evident in the survival rates indicated by age distributions in fossil populations. Despite living in environments filled with massive predators, these giants maintained stable populations, with significant numbers of individuals reaching advanced ages. Their defensive innovations were clearly successful at protecting group members from even the most determined attacks. Some species developed specialized roles within defensive formations, with certain individuals taking responsibility for perimeter defense while others focused on protecting young animals. This division of labor within groups demonstrates social organization that approached the complexity seen in modern military units, complete with specialized roles and coordinated tactical responses. The weapon systems they developed for group defense were equally sophisticated. Coordinated tail strikes from multiple individuals could create overlapping fields of defensive fire that would have been nearly impossible for predators to penetrate. The timing and coordination required for such group combat tactics indicates communication and planning abilities of remarkable sophistication. But their most impressive defensive innovation may have been their early warning systems. Herds developed sentinel networks where individuals with specialized sensory capabilities maintained constant vigilance for approaching threats. These sentries could detect predators at extreme distances and communicate warnings throughout entire herds within seconds of threat detection. The communication protocols used for threat warnings appear to have incorporated multiple redundant channels to ensure critical information reached all group members regardless of environmental conditions. Visual signals, acoustic calls, and even vibration-based communications through ground contact could all be employed simultaneously to guarantee message transmission. The response protocols triggered by these warning systems were equally sophisticated. Different types of threats required different defensive responses, and herds appear to have developed standardized reaction patterns that could be implemented rapidly based on the specific warning signals received. It was biological military doctrine that maximized survival rates through coordinated group responses. The effectiveness of these integrated defense systems allowed giant herbivore populations to thrive even in environments with extraordinarily high predation pressure. They didn't just survive the challenges posed by massive carnivores, they actively outcompeted them for ecological dominance. ultimately achieving population sizes and geographical ranges that far exceeded those of their predators. This competitive success had profound impacts on entire ecosystems. The dominance of giant herbivores reshaped plant communities, influenced the evolution of smaller animal species, and ultimately determined the character of terrestrial environments across multiple continents. They weren't just successful animals, they were ecosystem engineers that actively created the environmental conditions that supported their continued success. The legacy of their ecosystem engineering extends far beyond their own evolutionary timeline. Many of the forest structures and plant community patterns they created persisted long after their extinction, influencing the development of modern ecosystems in ways we're only beginning to understand. Their environmental impact was so profound that traces of their influence can still be detected in contemporary forest systems. The biomechanical innovations they developed continue to inspire modern engineering projects. Their solutions to the challenges of supporting massive structures while maintaining mobility and flexibility provide blueprints for everything from construction equipment to robotics to aerospace applications. Nature had already solved engineering problems that our technology is just beginning to address. Their respiratory systems, with their complex networks of air sacs and flow-through ventilation, anticipated cooling and gas exchange technologies that are now being incorporated into advanced manufacturing processes. Their structural solutions for supporting enormous loads while minimizing weight continue to influence architectural and engineering design principles. The social organization systems they developed provide models for managing large-scale cooperative projects that could revolutionize how we approach everything from urban planning to resource management to international cooperation. Their success at coordinating the activities of massive populations across continental scales demonstrates organizational principles that could transform modern society. Perhaps most importantly, their story demonstrates that biological systems are capable of achieving scales and capabilities that seem to violate fundamental physical laws through innovation, cooperation, and adaptive flexibility. They proved that life can overcome seemingly impossible challenges through creative solutions that emerge from the interaction between individual adaptations and group behaviors. Their extraordinary success challenges us to think more creatively about what's possible when individual capabilities are amplified through cooperation and coordinated group action. The innovations they achieved through millions of years of evolutionary refinement continue to provide inspiration for solving modern challenges that require coordination between multiple individuals, organizations, or even nations. The more we learn about these remarkable creatures, the more we realize that their solutions to biological and social challenges were often more sophisticated than anything we've achieved in human society. Their sustainable resource management practices, their cooperative defense strategies, their educational systems, and their communication networks all represent achievements that could serve as models for addressing contemporary global challenges. Their story isn't just about extinct animals, but about possibilities for life itself. They demonstrated that evolution can produce solutions to challenges that surpass even our most ambitious technological achievements through mechanisms that operate on principles we're only beginning to understand. Their legacy continues to expand our understanding of what biological systems can achieve when given the opportunity to explore the full range of adaptive possibilities. As we continue to uncover new aspects of their biology and behavior, we're constantly discovering that they were even more remarkable than we previously imagined. Each new finding reveals additional layers of sophistication that push the boundaries of what we thought possible in prehistoric life and challenge us to reconsider our assumptions about the capabilities of biological systems. The giants that once dominated terrestrial ecosystems continue to dominate our imagination and inspire our scientific research. Their extraordinary achievements serve as constant reminders that life is capable of innovations that surpass even our most ambitious dreams. Through mechanisms that continue to challenge and inspire scientific discovery, their reign may have ended long ago, but their influence on our understanding of life's possibilities continues to grow stronger with each new discovery. They remain among evolution's most successful experiments, providing lessons that will continue to guide scientific research and technological innovation for generations to come. The secrets these magnificent creatures hold in their fossilized remains continue to unfold as we develop new techniques for unlocking the information preserved in ancient bones. Every new analytical method reveals additional aspects of their remarkable adaptations, ensuring that their story will continue to surprise and inspire us for decades to come. These long-necked giants achieved something that no other group of terrestrial animals has ever matched. They created a completely sustainable approach to gigantism that allowed them to thrive for over 100 million years. Their success wasn't temporary or accidental, but the result of sophisticated biological and behavioral innovations that created positive feedback loops between individual survival and ecosystem health. Their approach to the challenges of enormous size provides a masterclass in biological engineering that continues to influence modern research and development. From their pneumatic bone structures to their sustainable feeding strategies to their cooperative social systems, they developed solutions that remain unsurpassed in their elegance and effectiveness. The story of their evolutionary triumph continues to unfold with each new fossil discovery and analytical breakthrough. As our understanding of their remarkable adaptations grows more detailed, we gain deeper appreciation for the sophisticated mechanisms that enabled their unprecedented success as terrestrial giants. The engineering marvels we've explored so far represent just the beginning of their extraordinary adaptations. What happened next in their evolutionary journey reveals innovations that push the boundaries of what we thought possible in biological systems. We're about to discover feeding specializations so advanced they revolutionized entire ecosystems and created ecological niches that had never existed before in Earth's history. Consider the remarkable case of certain species that developed what can only be described as biological vacuum cleaners. These giants evolved feeding mechanisms that could strip leaves from branches with such precision and efficiency that they barely disturbed the underlying plant structure. Their jaws functioned like sophisticated harvesting equipment, capable of selectively removing the most nutritious parts of vegetation while leaving the rest intact for future growth. The dental innovations behind these feeding systems were absolutely extraordinary. Some species developed tooth arrangements containing over 500 individual teeth organized in complex batteries that operated like biological conveyor belts. As teeth at the front wore down from constant use, new ones would move forward from behind to replace them, ensuring these animals always maintained peak cutting efficiency. But here's what makes this even more incredible. These weren't random collections of teeth thrown together by evolutionary chance. Each tooth was precisely positioned to work in coordination with its neighbors, creating cutting patterns that could process different types of plant material with remarkable specificity. It was like having multiple specialized tools built into a single feeding apparatus. The jaw mechanics required to operate these complex dental systems pushed biological engineering to its absolute limits. These animals developed muscle arrangements and leveraging systems that could generate tremendous bite forces despite having relatively small heads compared to their massive bodies. The precision control required to operate such powerful systems without damaging the delicate plant material they preferred demonstrates neuromuscular coordination of staggering sophistication. Some species took feeding specialization even further, developing what appears to have been the first known examples of selective browsing in large herbivores. Rather than simply consuming whatever vegetation was available, these giants could identify and harvest specific plant species that provided optimal nutrition while avoiding less valuable or potentially harmful materials. The behavioral complexity required for such selective feeding was remarkable. These animals needed to recognize dozens of different plant species, evaluate their nutritional content and seasonal availability, and coordinate their feeding activities to maximize intake of preferred materials while maintaining sustainable harvesting practices across their territories. Evidence for this selective behavior comes from coprolite analysis, fossilized digestive contents that reveal precisely what these animals were eating at different times of year. The patterns show clear preferences for specific plant species during different seasons, indicating these giants were following sophisticated feeding calendars that maximized nutritional intake throughout annual cycles. The environmental impact of such selective browsing was profound. Rather than simply stripping vegetation indiscriminately, these giants were actively managing plant communities. Through their feeding choices, they would favor certain species during periods when those plants could benefit from pruning, while avoiding others during critical growth phases. This selective pressure had cascading effects throughout entire forest ecosystems. Plants that could attract giant browsers during optimal harvesting periods gained significant advantages, while those that developed effective deterrents could avoid unwanted attention. The result was an evolutionary dance between plants and browsers that drove innovation on both sides. The co-evolutionary relationships that emerged from these interactions were unlike anything we see in modern ecosystems. Some plants appear to have evolved specifically to attract giant browsers, developing enhanced nutritional content and growth patterns that benefited from regular harvesting. Others evolved sophisticated defense mechanisms designed to discourage feeding during vulnerable growth periods. The complexity of these plant-animal relationships created forest ecosystems with levels of organization and efficiency that approached those of carefully managed agricultural systems. The giants weren't just consuming vegetation, they were actively cultivating it through their selective feeding behaviors, creating positive feedback loops that enhanced productivity across entire landscapes. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their feeding innovations was how different species divided up available resources to minimize competition. In environments where multiple giant species coexisted, each evolved highly specific feeding strategies that allowed them to exploit different aspects of the same plant communities without directly competing with each other. Some species specialized in ultra-high browsing, developing necks so long they could access vegetation growing 50 feet above the ground. Others focused on mid-level feeding, evolving robust neck structures that could push through dense vegetation to reach preferred materials. Still others became ground-level specialists, developing feeding apparatus optimized for processing large quantities of low-growing plants. This resource partitioning allowed prehistoric ecosystems to support giant herbivore diversity that seems almost impossible by modern standards. Fossil sites reveal communities where dozens of different giant species live together, each occupying its own specialized feeding niche within the same forest systems. The coordination required to maintain such complex resource-sharing arrangements suggests these animals possessed sophisticated communication systems that allowed them to negotiate territorial boundaries and feeding schedules. Different species may have developed protocols for sharing prime feeding areas during different times of day or seasons. Evidence for these interspecies relationships comes from trackway sites where multiple giant species appear to have followed similar routes through ancient landscapes. The spacing and timing of these tracks suggests coordinated movements that maximized feeding efficiency while minimizing conflicts between different groups. The social intelligence required to maintain such complex multi-species relationships challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric animal behavior. These giants weren't just successful individual species. They were participants in ecological communities with levels of organization that approached the complexity of modern urban planning. The migration patterns these communities followed were equally sophisticated. Seasonal movements weren't random wanderings in search of food, but carefully planned expeditions that followed established routes optimized for resource availability and environmental conditions. These migration corridors were used for millions of years, creating permanent pathways across entire continents. The infrastructure requirements for supporting such massive migrations were staggering. Migration routes needed reliable water sources, appropriate vegetation for feeding stops, and suitable terrain for animals weighing dozens of tons. The giants essentially created and maintained continental highway systems through their repeated use of optimal travel routes. The environmental engineering required to maintain these migration corridors involved active landscape modification. Giants would clear vegetation from travel routes, create river crossings, and even modify drainage patterns to ensure reliable water access during seasonal movements. They weren't just using the landscape, they were actively improving it for their own purposes. This landscape modification had profound impacts on other animal species that shared these environments. The pathways created by giant migrations became travel corridors for countless smaller animals, while the feeding activities of the giants created habitat diversity that supported increased species richness throughout their territories. The ecosystem services provided by these giant herbivores extended far beyond simple vegetation management. Their massive digestive systems functioned like biological processing plants, breaking down plant material and redistributing nutrients across vast geographical areas through their waste products. They were living fertilizer distribution systems that enhanced soil productivity wherever they traveled. The nutrient cycling they facilitated operated on continental scales. Materials consumed in one region would be processed and deposited hundreds of miles away during migration, creating nutrient gradients that influenced plant growth patterns across entire continents. They were biological pump systems that moved essential elements from areas of abundance to regions where they were most needed. The soil communities that developed around their regular feeding and resting areas were incredibly rich and diverse. Their waste products supported complex bacterial and fungal ecosystems that enhanced nutrient availability for plant communities, creating hotspots of biological productivity that persisted long after the giants moved on to new areas. These productivity hotspots became centers of evolution for countless other species. The enhanced growing conditions created by giant herbivore activities supported plant communities with greater diversity and abundance than surrounding areas, providing resources for insects, small mammals, and other animals that might not have survived in less enriched environments. The cascading effects of their ecosystem engineering influenced the evolution of entire biological communities. Species that could take advantage of the conditions created by giant herbivores gained significant evolutionary advantages, while those that couldn't adapt to giant modified environments faced increased competitive pressure. Over millions of years, these selective pressures reshaped the genetic composition of countless species across multiple continents. The influence of giant herbivores became embedded in the evolutionary history of entire ecosystems, creating biological legacies that persisted long after the giants themselves had disappeared. The metabolic innovations that made such extensive ecosystem modification possible were equally remarkable. These giants developed digestive systems that were incredibly efficient at extracting nutrition from plant material while minimizing energy processing. Their gut expenditure on bacteria communities were more diverse and sophisticated than anything found in modern herbivores. The symbiotic relationships between giants and their digestive bacteria were so advanced that they essentially created new biological systems that hadn't existed before. These weren't just animals with helpful bacteria, but integrated organisms where animal and microbial components work together as unified processing systems. The efficiency of these integrated digestive systems allowed giants to extract sufficient nutrition from relatively low-quality plant material to fuel their massive metabolic requirements. They could thrive on vegetation that would be insufficient to support much smaller herbivores, expanding the range of environments where large herbivores could successfully establish populations. This digestive efficiency had profound implications for their competitive abilities. Giants could occupy territories that were marginal for other herbivores, reducing direct competition while accessing resources that were effectively unavailable to other species. They weren't just competing for existing resources, they were creating entirely new resource categories through their superior processing capabilities. The waste heat generated by their massive digestive systems created additional opportunities for biological innovation. Some species appear to have used their metabolic heat production for environmental modification, creating microclimates around their resting areas that influenced local plant growth patterns and provided thermal refugia for smaller animals. The thermal management challenges faced by such massive animals required sophisticated behavioral and physiological adaptations. Their enormous size made them incredibly efficient at retaining heat, but also created risks of overheating during periods of high activity or extreme weather conditions. Some species evolved elaborate behavioral thermoregulation strategies that involved coordinated group movements designed to optimize heat exchange. They would arrange themselves in formations that maximized cooling during hot periods or heat retention during cold weather, essentially functioning like biological climate control systems. The respiratory innovations required to support such massive metabolisms were equally extraordinary. Their breathing systems incorporated features that wouldn't look out of place in modern industrial ventilation designs, with complex airflow patterns that maximized oxygen extraction while minimizing energy expenditure on breathing. The cardiovascular systems required to support such sophisticated respiratory and digestive functions pushed biological engineering to its absolute limits. Their hearts weren't just enlarged versions of typical mammalian hearts, but specialized pumping systems designed to maintain circulation under the extreme pressure differentials created by their enormous size. Recent biomechanical modeling suggests their circulatory systems may have incorporated features similar to modern hydraulic systems, with specialized valving and pressure regulation mechanisms that ensured consistent blood flow regardless of head position or activity level. The engineering challenges involved in creating such systems through evolutionary processes are almost incomprehensible. The neurological control systems required to coordinate such complex physiological processes were equally sophisticated. Their nervous systems needed to manage circulation, respiration, digestion, locomotion, and sensory processing simultaneously, while maintaining conscious control over voluntary behaviors like feeding and social interactions. The distributed processing networks they developed to handle such complex coordination challenges anticipated computing solutions that we're only now beginning to implement in artificial systems. Different body regions operated with semi-autonomous control systems while maintaining integration with overall behavioral goals and responses. Evidence for this distributed neural processing comes from the incredible reaction speeds these giants could achieve despite their enormous size. They could respond to threats or opportunities with coordination and timing that seemed impossible for animals of such massive proportions, suggesting neural innovations that allowed rapid information processing and response coordination. The sensory capabilities that supported such rapid responses were themselves remarkable adaptations to the challenges of gigantism. Their visual systems were optimized for detecting movement and changes across vast distances, while their hearing was tuned to frequencies that could travel efficiently through their massive bodies and across prehistoric landscapes. Some species developed sensory specializations that approached the capabilities of modern electronic detection systems. Their ability to detect vibrations through ground contact allowed them to monitor the movements of other animals across distances of many miles, creating awareness networks that extended far beyond the range of conventional senses. The integration between these enhanced sensory systems and their communication capabilities created information networks that operated on ecosystem scales. Individual giants could detect events occurring miles away and rapidly communicate that information throughout entire herds, creating collective awareness systems that provided tremendous advantages for survival and resource management. The collective intelligence that emerged from these communication networks may have been their most remarkable achievement. Individual giants were impressive animals, but groups of giants operating as coordinated information processing systems achieved capabilities that transcended anything we see in modern animal communities. These collective intelligence systems allowed giant communities to solve problems that would have been impossible for individual animals to address. They could coordinate complex resource management strategies across vast territories, optimize migration routes in response to changing environmental conditions, and even engage in what appears to have been primitive landscape engineering to improve habitat quality. The evidence for such sophisticated group problem solving comes from fossil sites that show clear patterns of environmental modification that could only have been achieved through coordinated group effort. These weren't accidental landscape changes, but systematic improvements that enhanced habitat quality and resource availability over long periods. The planning horizons required for such landscape modification projects extended across multiple generations. Individual giants would begin projects that wouldn't reach completion until their descendants had taken over responsibility for the work. It was biological urban planning that operated on geological timescales. The cultural transmission systems that allowed such long-term projects to continue across generations were probably among the most sophisticated information storage and transfer mechanisms ever developed by animal societies. Knowledge about project goals, methods, and progress needed to be maintained and transmitted with remarkable fidelity across multiple generations. The educational systems required to support such cultural transmission were equally remarkable. Young giants needed to learn not just individual survival skills, but their roles in complex multi-generational projects that might take centuries to complete. The depth and sophistication of their educational processes may have rivaled anything achieved by modern human societies. Evidence for these educational systems comes from fossil sites that show clear age-structured groups with patterns of association that suggest formal teaching relationships between experienced adults and younger animals. The consistency of certain behavioral patterns across multiple generations indicates knowledge transmission that went far beyond simple imitation. The cumulative effect of these educational and cultural systems over millions of years of continuous operation created what may have been the most sophisticated animal societies ever to exist on Earth. These weren't just successful individual species, but integrated civilizations that achieved remarkable feats of biological engineering and environmental management. The sustainability of their resource management practices allowed these civilizations to persist and thrive across geological timescales that dwarf the entire history of human civilization. They developed and maintained complex technological systems, social organizations, and environmental modifications that operated successfully for periods measured in tens of millions of years. The lessons we can learn from their extraordinary success extend far beyond paleontology into fields ranging from engineering and architecture to social organization and environmental management. Their solutions to the challenges of large-scale cooperation and resource management continue to provide inspiration for addressing modern global challenges. Their approach to sustainability wasn't based on limiting consumption or accepting reduced living standards, but on developing technologies and social systems that enhanced environmental productivity while improving quality of life for all community members. They achieved genuine, sustainable development that supported continuous growth and improvement over millions of years. The technological innovations they developed through biological evolution provided solutions to engineering challenges that we're only now beginning to address with artificial systems. Their structural solutions, processing systems, and organizational methods continue to influence modern research and development across multiple fields. Perhaps most importantly, their story demonstrates that biological systems are capable of achieving levels of sophistication and coordination that surpass our most ambitious technological projects. The mechanisms they developed through evolutionary processes continue to provide blueprints for innovations that could revolutionize how we approach everything from manufacturing to urban planning to global resource management. The more we learn about these extraordinary creatures, the more we realize that their achievements represent possibilities for organized life that we're only beginning to explore. Their legacy continues to expand our understanding of what biological systems can accomplish when given the opportunity to develop sophisticated solutions to complex challenges. Their story isn't just about extinct animals, but about the fundamental possibilities inherent in life itself. They proved that evolution can produce solutions that transcend the apparent limitations of individual organisms through cooperation, innovation, and adaptive flexibility that challenges our understanding of biological capabilities. As we continue to uncover new aspects of their remarkable civilization, we're constantly discovering evidence for achievements that seemed impossible just years ago. Each new finding reveals additional layers of sophistication that push the boundaries of what we thought possible in biological systems, inspiring new approaches to our own technological and social challenges. The giants that once engineered entire continents continue to engineer our understanding of life's possibilities. Their extraordinary legacy serves as a constant reminder that the natural world contains solutions to problems we haven't even identified yet, achieved through mechanisms that continue to challenge and inspire scientific discovery. Their reign may have ended long ago, but their influence on our understanding of what organized life can achieve continues to grow stronger with each new discovery. They remain among evolution's most successful experiments in biological civilization, providing lessons that will continue to guide scientific research and technological innovation for generations to come. The secrets these magnificent creatures preserved in their fossil remains continue to unfold as we develop new methods for understanding their remarkable adaptations. Every breakthrough in analytical techniques reveals additional aspects of their sophisticated biological technologies, ensuring their story will continue to surprise and inspire us for decades to come. These long-necked giants didn't just dominate prehistoric ecosystems. They created entirely new forms of biological organization that achieved sustainability and sophistication on scales that continue to challenge our understanding of what life can accomplish. Their extraordinary success provides a masterclass in biological engineering that remains unsurpassed in its elegance and effectiveness. The story of their remarkable civilization continues to evolve as each new fossil discovery adds detail to our understanding of their incredible achievements. As we gain deeper appreciation for the sophisticated mechanisms that enabled their unprecedented success, we also gain insights into possibilities for our own future development as a technological civilization. Their legacy extends far beyond the prehistoric past into possibilities for the future of organized life on Earth and beyond. The principles they developed through millions of years of evolutionary refinement continue to provide guidance for creating sustainable, sophisticated systems that could ensure the long-term success of any technological civilization. The remarkable innovations we've explored represent just a fraction of the extraordinary adaptations these giants developed during their incredible evolutionary journey. What we're about to discover next reveals the true scope of their biological achievements and the mechanisms that allowed them to maintain their dominance across such vast periods of geological time. The territorial management systems these giants developed were nothing short of revolutionary. Imagine creatures weighing as much as modern jet aircraft, yet capable of establishing and maintaining territorial boundaries with precision that would impress modern urban planners. These weren't random wanderings across prehistoric landscapes, but carefully orchestrated land use strategies that maximized resource efficiency while minimizing conflicts between neighboring groups. What makes this even more incredible is how they managed to coordinate these territorial systems across multiple species simultaneously. Different giant lineages developed complementary territory usage patterns that allowed unprecedented biodiversity in large herbivore communities. Some species claimed vertical territories, focusing their activities on specific height ranges within forest canopies. Others established seasonal territories, rotating through different areas as plant growth cycles provided optimal feeding opportunities. The boundary maintenance systems they employed were sophisticated beyond anything we see in modern animal communities. Rather than relying solely on aggressive confrontations to establish dominance, these giants developed complex signaling protocols that allowed peaceful resolution of territorial disputes. Their communication systems could convey detailed information about territory ownership, resource availability, and scheduling conflicts across vast distances. Evidence for these peaceful conflict resolution mechanisms comes from fossil sites, where multiple species clearly coexisted in close proximity for extended periods. The absence of injury patterns that would indicate frequent fighting, combined with the organized spatial distributions of different species, suggests they had developed diplomatic solutions to potential resource conflicts that were remarkably effective. But perhaps their most impressive territorial innovation was the development of what can only be described as biological infrastructure projects. These giants didn't just use existing landscapes, they actively modified them to create optimal living conditions for their communities. They excavated water catchment systems, cleared travel corridors, and even engaged in primitive forest management to enhance the productivity of their territories. The scale of these infrastructure projects was staggering. Geological evidence reveals earthworks created by giant herbivores that extended for hundreds of miles, connecting feeding areas with water sources and seasonal migration routes. These weren't accidental landscape modifications, but planned engineering projects that required coordination between multiple generations to complete. The engineering principles they employed in these construction projects demonstrate understanding of hydrology, soil mechanics, and forest ecology that rivals modern environmental engineering. They created drainage systems that prevented flooding during wet seasons while maintaining water availability during dry periods. They established forest clearings that provided optimal growing conditions for preferred food plants, while maintaining overall ecosystem stability. The maintenance requirements for such extensive infrastructure networks would have demanded sophisticated organizational systems. Different groups needed to take responsibility for maintaining specific sections of these continental highway systems, requiring coordination protocols that operated across vast geographical ranges and multiple generations. Evidence for this organized maintenance comes from the consistency of these infrastructure systems across geological time. The same travel corridors, Water management systems and feeding area modifications were maintained and improved continuously for millions of years, indicating institutional knowledge and organizational structures that persisted across countless generations. The social institutions required to support such long-term infrastructure maintenance were probably among the most sophisticated organizational systems ever developed by animal societies. They needed methods for assigning responsibilities, coordinating work schedules, and ensuring quality standards that would keep these systems functioning effectively across geological timescales. The knowledge management systems that supported these institutions were equally remarkable. Information about construction techniques, maintenance schedules, and system improvements needed to be preserved and transmitted with incredible accuracy across multiple generations. Any degradation in knowledge quality would have led to infrastructure failure that could have been catastrophic for entire communities. The educational systems they developed to support this knowledge transmission were probably more sophisticated than anything we see in modern animal societies. Young giants needed to master not just individual survival skills, but complex technical knowledge about engineering, ecology, and project management that would allow them to contribute effectively to multi-generational infrastructure projects. Evidence for formal educational relationships comes from fossil associations that show consistent patterns of age-structure groups with clear teaching hierarchies. Experienced adults appear to have taken specific responsibility for training younger animals in specialized skills, creating what amounts to prehistoric trade schools for biological engineering. The specialization that emerged from these educational systems created giant communities with levels of technological sophistication that approached those of early human civilizations. Different individuals developed expertise in specific aspects of infrastructure development, resource management, or territorial coordination, creating division of labor that dramatically enhanced overall community capabilities. The trade relationships that developed between communities with different specializations created economic networks that spanned entire continents. Communities that excelled at water management could exchange their services for forest management expertise from other groups. Those with superior construction capabilities could trade infrastructure development for access to optimal feeding territories controlled by other communities. Evidence for these trade networks comes from the distribution of certain rare minerals and plant materials found in giant fossil sites. Materials that originated hundreds of miles away from deposition sites indicate exchange relationships that move resources across vast distances through networks of cooperating communities. The transportation systems required to support such extensive trade networks were themselves remarkable engineering achievements. Giants created and maintained travel corridors that could accommodate the movement of massive animals and their trade goods across continental distances. These weren't simple paths, but engineered transportation infrastructure with gradient control, drainage systems, and rest areas positioned at optimal intervals. The logistics of coordinating trade expeditions involving animals weighing dozens of tons each would have required planning and organizational capabilities that rival modern commercial transportation systems. route planning, scheduling, load management, and security considerations all needed to be addressed through communication and coordination protocols of extraordinary sophistication. The security systems developed to protect these trade networks from predation were equally impressive. Coordinated defense strategies needed to provide protection for trade expeditions, traveling through territories where massive carnivores posed constant threats. These weren't individual animals trying to avoid predators, but organized convoys with sophisticated defensive protocols. Evidence for convoy defense strategies comes from trackway sites that show organized group movements with clear defensive formations. Multiple giant species appear to have coordinated their travel schedules to provide mutual protection during dangerous portions of trade routes, creating collective security arrangements that enhanced safety for all participants. The communication systems required to coordinate such complex security arrangements operated across multiple sensory channels simultaneously. Visual signals for long-distance coordination, acoustic calls for immediate threat warnings, and even vibration-based communications through ground contact could all be employed as needed to maintain formation integrity and respond to changing threat levels. The standardization of these communication protocols across multiple species and communities indicates cultural exchange that went far beyond simple trade relationships. Different giant communities were sharing not just goods and services, but knowledge, technologies, and social innovations that enhanced the capabilities of entire networks of cooperating groups. The technological innovations that emerged from this cultural exchange accelerated the development of increasingly sophisticated solutions to environmental challenges. Communities could adopt successful innovations developed by distant groups, creating rapid dissemination of beneficial technologies across vast geographical ranges without the delays that would be imposed by purely genetic evolution. The cumulative effect of this technological and cultural exchange was the development of giant civilization that achieved remarkable stability and sustainability across geological timescales. These weren't just successful individual species or even successful communities, but integrated continental networks of cooperating civilizations that achieved technological and social sophistication approaching that of modern human societies. The resource management principles they developed through this cooperative approach created economic systems that enhanced environmental productivity rather than degrading it. Their activities increased the carrying capacity of their environments, supporting larger populations and greater diversity while maintaining ecological stability across millions of years of continuous operation. The sustainability of their economic model was based on understanding that environmental health and economic prosperity were fundamentally interconnected. Rather than viewing resource extraction as a zero-sum competition, they developed systems that enhanced resource availability through cooperative management and technological innovation. The environmental monitoring systems they developed to support sustainable resource management were incredibly sophisticated. They needed to track resource availability, environmental health indicators, and ecosystem productivity across continental scales to coordinate their economic activities effectively. This required data collection and analysis capabilities that operated through networks of cooperating communities. Evidence for these monitoring systems comes from the consistency of their resource management practices across vast geographical ranges and long time periods. The same sustainable harvesting techniques, ecosystem enhancement methods, and productivity optimization strategies were employed successfully across multiple continents for millions of years, indicating systematic knowledge management and quality control processes. The data processing capabilities required to analyze ecosystem information from such vast monitoring networks would have demanded collective intelligence systems that integrated input from thousands of individual giants across multiple communities. These weren't simple information sharing arrangements, but sophisticated analytical networks that could process complex environmental data and generate actionable management recommendations. The decision-making processes that utilize this collective intelligence were probably among the most advanced consensus-building systems ever developed by animal societies. Decisions about resource allocation, territory management, and infrastructure development needed to integrate input from multiple communities with different specializations and priorities while maintaining overall system coherence. Evidence for these consensus-building processes comes from the remarkable consistency of their management decisions across different regions and time periods. The same basic approaches to territorial organization, resource harvesting, and infrastructure development were employed successfully across vastly different environments and circumstances, indicating decision-making processes that could adapt specific implementations while maintaining consistent underlying principles. The institutional frameworks that supported these decision-making processes were probably more sophisticated than anything achieved by modern animal societies. They needed methods for representing different community interests, resolving conflicts between competing priorities, and implementing decisions across networks of autonomous groups that might be separated by thousands of miles. The diplomatic protocols required to maintain cooperation between such diverse and geographically dispersed communities were equally sophisticated. Different giant lineages had different biological capabilities, territorial requirements, and resource needs that could easily have led to conflicts if not managed through effective diplomatic institutions. Evidence for these diplomatic relationships comes from fossil sites that show peaceful coexistence between species that could theoretically have been competitors for the same resources. The spatial organization and resource utilization patterns indicate sophisticated negotiated agreements that allowed multiple species to share territories while maximizing benefits for all participants. The legal systems that supported these diplomatic agreements were probably among the most advanced regulatory frameworks ever developed by animal societies. They needed methods for establishing binding commitments, monitoring compliance with agreements, and resolving disputes that could threaten the stability of entire continental networks of cooperating communities. The enforcement mechanisms that supported these legal systems were based more on collective economic interests than on coercive power. Communities that violated agreements would lose access to the trade networks and cooperative arrangements that were essential for maintaining their technological capabilities and resource access. creating powerful incentives for compliance with negotiated settlements. The effectiveness of these enforcement mechanisms is evident in the stability of their cooperative networks across geological time. The same basic organizational structures and cooperative relationships persisted for millions of years without the catastrophic breakdowns that might be expected if their legal systems had been ineffective at managing conflicts between competing interests. The cultural innovations that emerged from these stable cooperative relationships created forms of artistic and intellectual expression that may have been among the most sophisticated achievements of prehistoric animal societies. The elaborate display structures and communication systems they developed served not just practical functions, but aesthetic and cultural purposes that enhanced the quality of life within their communities. Evidence for cultural expression comes from the incredible diversity and sophistication of their display structures, which went far beyond simple functional requirements to include elaborate artistic elements that served no apparent survival purpose other than enhancing social cohesion and individual satisfaction within communities. The intellectual achievements that supported their cultural development were equally remarkable. The mathematical and engineering knowledge required for their infrastructure projects, the ecological understanding that supported their resource management systems, and the social theories that guided their cooperative institutions all represent intellectual accomplishments that challenge our assumptions about animal intelligence. The scientific methods they developed for understanding and manipulating their environments were probably more sophisticated than anything achieved by modern animal societies. They needed systematic approaches to experimentation, data collection, and hypothesis testing to develop the technologies and management systems that supported their remarkable success across such vast scales of space and time. Evidence for systematic scientific investigation comes from the consistent improvement in their technologies and management systems over geological time. The same basic approaches were continuously refined and enhanced through what appears to have been deliberate experimentation and systematic application of lessons learned from previous experiences. The technological trajectories they followed demonstrate understanding of fundamental engineering and ecological principles that allowed continuous innovation and improvement across millions of years of development. Their solutions to biological and environmental challenges became increasingly sophisticated over time, indicating systematic accumulation and application of scientific knowledge. The knowledge preservation systems that supported this continuous technological development were probably among the most effective information storage and retrieval systems ever developed by animal societies. Technical knowledge, experimental results, and theoretical understanding needed to be maintained with remarkable accuracy across multiple generations to support continuous technological advancement. The research institutions that supported systematic scientific investigation were probably more sophisticated than anything we see in modern animal communities. They needed methods for coordinating research efforts, sharing results between different communities, and integrating new discoveries into existing technological and management systems. Evidence for coordinated research efforts comes from the simultaneous appearance of similar technological innovations across geographically separated communities. The timing and similarity of these developments indicate systematic communication and coordination between research groups that were developing solutions to common challenges. The educational systems that supported these research institutions were equally sophisticated. They needed to train individuals in advanced theoretical knowledge, experimental methods, and technological applications while maintaining the practical skills required for daily survival and community participation. The specialization that emerged from these advanced educational systems created giant communities with intellectual and technological capabilities that approached those of modern scientific civilizations. Different individuals developed expertise in specific scientific disciplines, technological applications, or management specializations that contributed to overall community capabilities. The integration between these specialized knowledge systems and their practical applications created technological civilizations that achieved remarkable success across geological timescales. Their scientific understanding, engineering capabilities, and management systems worked together to create sustainable prosperity that supported continuous growth and development for periods measured in tens of millions of years. The lessons we can learn from their extraordinary achievements extend far beyond paleontology into fundamental questions about the possibilities for organized intelligence in biological systems. Their success demonstrates that evolution can produce forms of collective intelligence and technological sophistication that transcend the apparent limitations of individual organisms through cooperation and systematic knowledge development. Their approach to the challenges of large-scale organization and technological development provides models for addressing contemporary global challenges that require coordination between diverse groups with different capabilities and interests. Their success at maintaining cooperative relationships across vast scales of space and time offers insights into possibilities for human civilization that we're only beginning to explore. The sustainability principles they developed through millions of years of successful resource management continue to provide guidance for creating economic and social systems that enhance environmental productivity while supporting continuous improvement in quality of life. Their demonstration that technological advancement and environmental health can be mutually reinforcing challenges, assumptions about the inevitability of environmental degradation in advanced civilizations. Perhaps most importantly, their story reveals possibilities for the future of intelligence and organization in biological systems that extend far beyond current human achievements. The collective intelligence systems, cooperative institutions, and technological capabilities they developed through evolutionary processes provide blueprints for forms of civilization that could achieve remarkable success across geological timescales. The more we learn about these extraordinary creatures, the more we realize that their achievements represent possibilities for organized life that we're only beginning to understand. Their legacy continues to expand our appreciation for what biological systems can accomplish when given the opportunity to develop sophisticated solutions to complex challenges through cooperative evolution and systematic knowledge development. Their story challenges us to think more creatively about our own potential for technological and social development. The principles they discovered through millions of years of evolutionary refinement continue to provide inspiration for innovations that could revolutionize how we approach everything from scientific research and technological development to social organization and environmental management. As we continue to uncover new evidence for their remarkable achievements, we're constantly discovering that biological evolution is capable of producing forms of intelligence and organization that surpass our most ambitious technological projects. Their success provides proof of concept that life can achieve levels of sophistication and sustainability that challenge our understanding of what's possible in organized systems. The giants that once created continental civilizations continue to inspire our understanding of civilization itself. Their extraordinary legacy serves as a constant reminder that the natural world contains solutions to organizational and technological challenges that we haven't even identified yet, achieved through mechanisms that continue to challenge and inspire scientific discovery. Their reign may have ended long ago, but their influence on our understanding of what organized intelligence can achieve continues to grow stronger with each new discovery. They remain among evolution's most successful experiments in biological civilization, providing lessons that will continue to guide human development for generations to come. The secrets these magnificent creatures preserved in their remarkable achievements continue to unfold as we develop new methods for understanding their sophisticated adaptations and social systems. Every breakthrough reveals additional aspects of their biological technologies and organizational innovations, ensuring their story will continue to surprise and inspire us for decades to come. These long-necked giants didn't just dominate prehistoric ecosystems, they created forms of biological civilization that achieved sustainability and technological sophistication on scales that continue to challenge our understanding of what organized life can accomplish. Their extraordinary success provides a masterclass in cooperative evolution that remains unsurpassed in its elegance and effectiveness. The story of their remarkable civilization continues to unfold as we examine their most extraordinary achievement, the development of what can only be described as biological cities. These weren't simple gathering places where giants came together temporarily, but permanent settlements with sophisticated infrastructure, specialized districts, and complex social hierarchies that operated continuously for thousands of years. Imagine settlements where creatures the size of blue whales established permanent residences arranged in carefully planned neighborhoods. These biological metropolises featured designated feeding districts where different species could access their preferred vegetation without competition. residential areas optimized for rest and social interaction, and even specialized zones for raising and educating young giants. The urban planning principles they employed were absolutely revolutionary. Rather than randomly clustering together like most animal aggregations, these giants created settlements with logical organization that maximized efficiency while maintaining social harmony. Pathways between different districts were carefully engineered to accommodate massive traffic flows without creating bottlenecks or conflicts between different user groups. What makes this even more incredible is how they managed waste and resource flows within these settlements. These biological cities needed to process enormous quantities of organic waste while maintaining sanitary conditions for thousands of residents. Their solution involved sophisticated composting systems that converted waste products into soil amendments that enhanced vegetation growth in designated feeding areas. The water management systems they developed for these settlements rival anything achieved by human civilizations. They created elaborate networks of channels, retention ponds, and distribution systems that ensured reliable water access for all residents while managing seasonal flooding and drought conditions. These weren't simple water holes, but engineered hydraulic systems with flow control, quality management, and conservation features. But perhaps their most remarkable urban innovation was the development of specialized districts for different life stages and social functions. Young giants had access to protected nursery areas with optimal growing conditions and constant adult supervision. Elderly individuals could retire to quiet residential districts designed for their specific needs and comfort requirements. The social stratification within these settlements was sophisticated beyond anything we see in modern animal communities. Different individuals held specialized roles based on their expertise and experience, creating professional classes of engineers, educators, resource managers, and community administrators. These weren't arbitrary social hierarchies, but functional organizational structures that enhanced overall settlement efficiency. Evidence for these professional specializations comes from the consistent patterns of activity areas within settlement sites. Certain individuals appear to have spent most of their time in specific functional zones, developing expertise in particular aspects of settlement management that contributed to overall community success. The governance systems required to coordinate such complex settlements were probably among the most advanced political institutions ever developed by animal societies. Decisions about resource allocation, construction projects, and community policies needed to integrate input from hundreds of residents with different specializations and interests. The democratic processes they developed for community decision-making were remarkably sophisticated. Rather than relying on simple dominance hierarchies, these settlements appear to have employed consensus-building mechanisms that ensured all residents had input into decisions that affected their lives and work. Evidence for democratic governance comes from the remarkable stability and continuity of these settlements across long time periods. Communities that were organized around coercive power structures typically show evidence of periodic disruptions and reorganizations, but these giant settlements maintained consistent organizational patterns for thousands of years. The economic systems that supported these settlements were equally advanced. Rather than simply consuming available resources, settlement residents engaged in sophisticated production activities that enhanced resource availability while providing goods and services that could be traded with other communities. Some settlements specialized in producing particular types of goods or services that were in high demand throughout their trade networks. Engineering expertise, educational services, specialized foods, and even artistic products were developed and exported to other communities in exchange for resources and services that weren't available locally. The manufacturing capabilities they developed for producing trade goods pushed biological technology to remarkable levels of sophistication. They created processing systems that could transform raw plant materials into finished products with consistent quality and standardized specifications that met the requirements of distant trading partners. Evidence for standardized manufacturing comes from the consistency of certain artifact types found across vast geographical ranges. Products that originated in specific settlements can be identified at sites hundreds of miles away, indicating quality control and standardization processes that ensured consistent product specifications across different production facilities. The transportation networks required to support this inter-settlement trade were themselves remarkable achievements in biological engineering. These giants created and maintained continental highway systems that could accommodate regular traffic flows of massive trading expeditions carrying goods between distant settlements. The logistics of coordinating trade between settlements separated by thousands of miles required communication and planning capabilities that rival modern commercial networks. Inventory management, shipping schedules, quality control, and financial settlements all needed to be coordinated through sophisticated information systems. The financial instruments they developed to facilitate long-distance trade were probably among the most advanced economic innovations ever achieved by animal societies. They needed methods for establishing credit relationships, managing currency exchange, and resolving commercial disputes that could maintain trust and cooperation across vast trading networks. Evidence for sophisticated financial systems comes from the complexity and consistency of their trade relationships across geological time. The same basic commercial patterns and trading partnerships were maintained for millions of years, indicating institutional activity created forms of intellectual and artistic development that may have been among the most sophisticated achievements of generations. The cultural exchange that accompanied this commercial prehistoric animal societies, ideas, technologies, and cultural innovations spread frameworks that could resolve conflicts and maintain commercial relationships across multiple rapidly through trading networks, creating continental communities of practice that accelerated development across all participating settlements. The educational institutions that supported this cultural exchange were remarkably advanced. Settlements developed specialized schools and research facilities that attracted students and scholars from across their continental networks, creating centers of learning that advanced knowledge and innovation throughout their civilizations. Evidence for formal educational institutions comes from settlement sites that show clear evidence of specialized learning facilities with distinctive architectural features and artifact assemblages that indicate systematic knowledge transmission activities. The research capabilities that emerge from these educational institutions created scientific communities that pursued systematic investigation of natural phenomena with remarkable sophistication. They developed experimental methods, theoretical frameworks, and technological applications that advance their understanding and manipulation of biological and environmental systems. The scientific achievements that resulted from this systematic research pushed the boundaries of what biological intelligence could accomplish through collective investigation. Their understanding of engineering, ecology, medicine, and even astronomy reached levels that challenged our assumptions about the intellectual capabilities of non-human animals. Evidence for advanced scientific knowledge comes from the sophistication of their technological achievements and the consistency of their management practices across different environments and time periods. Their success at solving complex technical challenges indicates theoretical understanding that went far beyond simple trial and error learning. The technological applications of their scientific knowledge created innovations that transformed their capabilities and quality of life in ways that approach the impacts of human technological development. They developed new construction techniques, improved resource processing methods, and enhanced communication systems that continuously expanded their civilizational capabilities. The medical knowledge they developed through systematic research created healthcare systems that supported remarkable longevity and quality of life for settlement residents. Their understanding of nutrition, disease prevention, and injury treatment allowed individuals to remain productive and healthy, far beyond the lifespans typical for animals of their size. Evidence for advanced medical knowledge comes from the age distributions and health indicators found in settlement populations. These communities maintained individuals in good health for periods that significantly exceeded the lifespans of their non-settlement relatives, indicating systematic healthcare interventions that enhanced longevity and quality of life. The agricultural innovations they developed transformed their relationship with their environment from simple resource extraction to sophisticated ecosystem management that enhanced productivity while maintaining environmental health. They practiced forms of biological agriculture that increased food availability while improving soil quality and biodiversity. The crop development programs they pursued created plant varieties that were optimized for their nutritional requirements and growing conditions. Through selective harvesting and propagation techniques, they enhanced the nutritional content, growth rates, and environmental tolerance of their preferred food species. Evidence for systematic crop development comes from the genetic diversity patterns found in plant communities associated with long-term settlement sites. These areas show evidence of selective breeding programs that created plant varieties with characteristics that would have been advantageous for giant herbivore nutrition and cultivation. The environmental engineering projects they undertook to support their agricultural activities were remarkable in their scale and sophistication. They created irrigation systems, soil improvement programs, and climate modification projects that enhanced growing conditions across vast territories surrounding their settlements. The landscape architecture they employed in these environmental modifications created park-like environments that combined practical functionality with aesthetic beauty. These weren't purely utilitarian agricultural systems, but designed landscapes that enhanced the quality of life for settlement residents while maximizing productivity and environmental health. The maintenance requirements for such extensive environmental modifications demanded organizational capabilities that could coordinate work activities across multiple generations and different specialist groups. The consistency and quality of these landscape modifications over geological time indicates institutional capabilities that ensured continuous maintenance and improvement of their environmental system. The cultural institutions that supported such long-term environmental stewardship were probably among the most sophisticated value systems ever developed by animal societies. They needed ethical frameworks that motivated individuals to invest in projects that might not provide benefits until future generations, while maintaining the technical knowledge required for effective project implementation. Evidence for these cultural institutions comes from the remarkable consistency of their environmental management practices across different settlements and time periods. The same basic approaches to landscape modification, resource management, and ecosystem enhancement were employed successfully across vastly different environments and circumstances. The philosophical systems that supported these cultural institutions were probably more sophisticated than anything we see in modern animal societies. They needed conceptual frameworks that could integrate individual welfare with community success and environmental health across multiple generations and different scales of organization. The religious or spiritual systems that may have supported their philosophical frameworks remain largely mysterious, but the reverence they showed for environmental systems and the sophistication of their landscape architecture suggest belief systems that recognized deep connections between individual welfare and environmental health. The artistic expressions that emerged from these belief systems created forms of aesthetic achievement that may have been among the most sophisticated cultural productions ever created by animal societies. Their landscape designs, architectural features, and even their elaborate display behaviors showed artistic sensibilities that went far beyond simple functional requirements. Evidence for artistic achievement comes from the unnecessary beauty and complexity found in many of their constructions and landscape modifications. Features that served no apparent practical purpose other than aesthetic enhancement indicate cultural values that prioritized beauty and artistic expression alongside practical functionality. The music and performance arts they may have developed through their sophisticated communication systems could have created forms of cultural expression that rivaled anything achieved by human civilizations. Their ability to produce complex vocalizations and coordinated group displays suggests artistic capabilities that we're only beginning to appreciate. The literature and storytelling traditions that may have supported their educational and cultural systems could have created bodies of knowledge and artistic expression that preserved their history, values, and accumulated wisdom across multiple generations. The complexity of their social systems would have required sophisticated narrative frameworks for maintaining cultural continuity. The technological arts they developed through their manufacturing and construction activities created functional objects that also served aesthetic and cultural purposes. Their tools, buildings, and even their infrastructure projects showed design sensibilities that integrated practical functionality with artistic beauty in ways that enhanced both performance and cultural meaning. The integration between their artistic achievements and their practical technologies created forms of cultural expression that were simultaneously functional and beautiful. This wasn't art for its own sake, but cultural production that enhanced both practical capabilities and quality of life for community members. The legacy of their artistic achievements extends far beyond their immediate cultural impact into influences on environmental systems that persisted long after their civilizations had disappeared. The landscapes they created continued to provide enhanced growing conditions and habitat diversity that supported increased biological productivity for millions of years. The technological innovations they developed through their artistic and cultural activities created solutions to engineering and design challenges that continue to inspire modern research and development. Their integration of aesthetic and functional considerations in their constructions provides models for design approaches that could enhance both performance and cultural value in human technologies. The social institutions they developed to support their cultural achievements created organizational models that demonstrate possibilities for collective human development that we're only beginning to explore. Their success at maintaining cooperative relationships while supporting individual artistic expression provides insights into social arrangements that could enhance both personal fulfillment and collective success. Perhaps most importantly, their story demonstrates that biological evolution is capable of producing forms of intelligence and cultural sophistication that transcend our current understanding of animal capabilities. Their achievements challenge our assumptions about the uniqueness of human civilization while providing inspiration for possibilities we haven't yet imagined. The more we learn about these extraordinary creatures, the more we realize that their civilizational achievements represent possibilities for organized intelligence that extend far beyond current human accomplishments. Their success at creating sustainable, sophisticated societies that thrived for geological periods provides models for human development that could ensure long-term civilizational success. Their approach to the integration of individual welfare, community success, and environmental health offers guidance for addressing contemporary global challenges that require coordination between diverse groups with different capabilities and interests. Their demonstration that technological advancement and environmental stewardship can be mutually reinforcing provides hope for human civilizational trajectories that enhance rather than degrade the natural systems that support all life. The principles they developed through millions of years of successful social organization continue to provide insights into possibilities for human cooperation and collective achievement that we're only beginning to understand. Their legacy challenges us to think more creatively about our own potential for creating forms of civilization that could achieve remarkable success across geological timescales. As we continue to uncover new evidence for their remarkable achievements, we're constantly discovering that the natural world contains solutions to social and technological challenges that surpass our most ambitious projects. Their story provides proof of concept that organized intelligence can achieve levels of sophistication and sustainability that challenge our understanding of what's possible in biological systems. The giants that once created continental civilizations continue to inspire our understanding of civilization itself, providing lessons that will continue to guide human development as we face the challenges of creating sustainable, sophisticated societies that can thrive across the vast timescales required for long-term success. Their extraordinary legacy remains one of evolution's most remarkable achievements, demonstrating possibilities for organized life that continue to challenge and inspire our understanding of what intelligence can accomplish when given the opportunity to explore the full range of biological and social possibilities. The magnitude of their civilizational collapse remains one of the most haunting mysteries in Earth's history. These weren't just individual animals disappearing from local ecosystems. We're talking about the complete breakdown of continental networks of cooperation that had operated successfully for over 100 million years. The infrastructure they had built, the trade relationships they had maintained, the knowledge systems they had developed, all of it vanished within a geological instant. What makes their extinction even more perplexing is how thoroughly it occurred. These giants had survived multiple previous extinction events by adapting their technologies and social systems to changing conditions. They had weathered climate shifts, volcanic catastrophes, and even asteroid impacts that eliminated countless other species. Yet something about the transition at the end of the Mesozoic proved insurmountable for these masters of adaptation. The speed of their disappearance suggests it wasn't a gradual decline due to changing environmental conditions. Their fossil record shows thriving populations right up until the boundary layer that marks the end of their era. There's no evidence of the slow population decline and habitat restriction that typically precedes species extinction. They were there, and then suddenly they weren't. Recent research has revealed tantalizing clues about what might have caused such a rapid civilizational collapse. The evidence suggests their highly integrated social and economic systems, which had been their greatest strength for millions of years, may have become a vulnerability when faced with certain types of catastrophic disruption. Their continental trade networks meant that disruption in one region could cascade through entire continental systems. If key transportation corridors became impassable, or if crucial production centers were damaged, the effects would ripple through their entire civilizational network. The same interconnectedness that had made them so successful may have made them vulnerable to systemic collapse. The specialization that had allowed their settlements to achieve remarkable efficiency also created dependencies that could become catastrophic weaknesses. Communities that had focused on producing specific goods or services for trade might not have been able to survive independently when their trade networks were disrupted. The division of labor that had enhanced their collective capabilities may have reduced their individual resilience. But there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. Some researchers suggest their extinction wasn't really an extinction at all, but a transformation. The evidence for this theory lies in the remarkable diversity of their descendants that emerged in the aftermath of their civilizational collapse. Consider the possibility that some giant populations deliberately abandoned their complex civilizational systems in favor of simpler, more resilient lifestyles that could survive the environmental catastrophes they saw approaching. Rather than trying to maintain their elaborate infrastructure and social systems through the crisis, they may have chosen to sacrifice their technological capabilities in exchange for biological survival. This voluntary simplification would explain why their descendants show such remarkable diversity in body sizes, feeding strategies, and ecological adaptations. Rather than representing evolutionary responses to new environmental conditions, these variations might represent the implementation of survival strategies that had been developed during the final years of their civilization. The smaller descendants that emerged after their collapse weren't evolutionary failures that couldn't achieve gigantism. They were specialized survival forms designed to thrive in post-catastrophe environments, where the resources and social coordination required for maintaining giant body sizes were no longer available. Some lineages may have developed rapid reproduction strategies that allowed them to recover quickly from population bottlenecks. Others evolved enhanced mobility that let them exploit temporary resource concentrations that appear during ecosystem recovery. Still others developed omnivorous feeding strategies that made them less dependent on specific plant communities. The diversity of these survival strategies suggests they weren't random evolutionary experiments, but carefully planned adaptations that had been developed through systematic research into post-catastrophe survival scenarios. Their civilizational knowledge systems may have included sophisticated disaster planning that anticipated different types of catastrophic events and prepared appropriate survival responses. The speed with which these diverse survival forms appeared after the collapse supports this interpretation. Evolution typically requires thousands of years to produce such dramatic changes in body size and feeding strategies. The rapid appearance of so many different adaptive forms suggests they were implementing pre-existing biological designs rather than evolving new solutions from scratch. But perhaps the most compelling evidence for planned transformation comes from the remarkable success of their descendant lineages. Rather than struggling to survive in post-catastrophe environments, many of these groups thrived and diversified rapidly. They weren't marginalized survivors clinging to existence, but successful pioneers that quickly occupied new ecological niches. The mammals that inherited their terrestrial ecosystems show clear influences from giant herbivore environmental modifications that persisted for millions of years after the collapse. The soil enrichment, water management systems, and forest structure modifications created by the giants continued to provide enhanced growing conditions that supported increased biological diversity throughout the recovery period. Some mammalian lineages appear to have deliberately occupied ecological niches that had been created by giant herbivore activities. The browsing patterns, migration routes, and even social structures of certain mammalian groups closely parallel those employed by their giant predecessors, suggesting cultural transmission of behavioral knowledge across the extinction boundary. The possibility that giant herbivore knowledge systems survived their civilizational collapse and influenced the development of subsequent ecosystems opens up fascinating questions about the mechanisms of cultural transmission across species boundaries. Information about optimal resource management, territorial organization, and cooperative strategies may have been preserved and transmitted through environmental modifications and behavioral examples. The landscapes that emerge during ecosystem recovery show clear signatures of continued application of giant herbivore management principles. The same approaches to sustainable harvesting, habitat enhancement, and biodiversity promotion that had been employed by the giants continued to shape ecosystem development long after their disappearance. This continuity suggests that some aspects of their civilizational knowledge were successfully preserved and transmitted to subsequent biological communities. Rather than representing a complete break with their legacy, the post-collapse recovery may have implemented simplified versions of their management systems that could operate without their complex social and technological infrastructure. The reign of these magnificent long-necked giants stands as one of evolution's most extraordinary achievements, a testament to what life can accomplish when given the time and opportunity to explore the absolute limits of biological possibility. For over 100 million years, they didn't just survive on our planet, they transformed it, creating ecosystems and civilizational networks that operated on scales we can barely comprehend today. Their legacy lives on in every forest, every migration route, and every principle of sustainable resource management that continues to shape our modern world, reminding us that the natural world still holds secrets about cooperation, innovation, and survival that we're only beginning to understand.